Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare podcast is excited to welcome Raine Bergstrom to the show today. Raine has been really influential in the software domain for a number of years. He started his career early on working directly for Paul Allen at a company called Asymmetrics when Paul left Microsoft. And then from there went over to create the AIM product for AOL that was a precursor to all the instant messaging that we use today. And then Raine also went on from there to Intel, where he was instrumental in the Internet of Things, and then ZipWhip, and now INRIX, where he's the product lead for data analytics and increasingly for generative AI within INRIX. So I'm very happy to welcome Raine today. Welcome to the podcast.
No, thanks very much for having me on the show.
So I'm just curious, just to launch right into it, you're at INRIX today. INRIX has been really focused on data. So I know data is changing with the age of AI, and this is a bit of a passion for you. So tell me about kind of what INRIX is doing with AI and what we can expect around the world of data and AI.
Yeah, sure. So INRIX is a it's a mobility company. And what we focus on the public sector. So think departments of transportation, making cities, reducing congestion, making traffic signals work better, but also helping people to make cities safer so that there are fewer fatalities, either in cars or pedestrians. And so we work there, but we also work on the enterprise side. We work with, the largest companies in the world that deliver, people and packages, again, to help their mobility questions. And, INRIX, the whole idea of looking at, the movement of people, vehicles, they saw 20 years ago. So, a lot of the cars that, you had, 10 years ago, those were all powered by INRIX and traffic. So, on your head unit, the traffic you saw there was coming from INRIX. Since then, we have moved a lot more into the analytics side of things, more on B2B and B2G. And then, just over a year ago, when the large language models, when ChatGPT came out, it became very obvious that those people with large amounts of data were going to be able to extract new insights from that data. That's what ChatGPT gave us. But of course, now we've got a lot of different language models, and we have announced INRIX Compass. And INRIX Compass allows our customers to investigate our data lake and ask questions. And of course, with generative AI, it will come back with answers. You can ask it things like, how do I make this intersection safer? Or why is this intersection so unsafe? Or even, what abnormalities are happening on my roads right now that I should be taking a look at? So these are the kinds of things that the kinds of questions, the kinds of things that we're going to be answering those questions with our Compass and our data lake.
Right. What's fascinating about what INRIX is doing is that AI has been seen often, especially generative AI, has been seen as providing content. And the content can be, like an article, or it can be a summary of something, or it can be even a poorly written rap song, right? But you're actually using AI to save lives. And you're actually using AI to create smarter understandings of traffic patterns that people can use to be safer. And so that's an application of AI that has real world consequences, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's actually what INRIX is all about: smarter, safer, greener. But we have software products today that allow, again, operations managers to, we've actually had artificial intelligence in our products for years so that we can, but generative AI, that old AI was more narrow. With generative AI, we have much broader capabilities. And so, what we've unlocked is really at a few different levels that we won't be releasing them all at the same time. But the first thing with generative AI is you can ask, what is going on? So, and of course you can look at Google Maps and see, oh, well, there's a crash here, but, or there's congestion here. But what generative AI can do is look at everything, and then it can identify things that are abnormalities very quickly. So it can look at everything and say, look over here, this isn't normal. And then the next layer down from what is the why. Why is this happening? Why is there congestion here? And it could be because there is a fire 3 blocks over and everybody's being rerouted. And then, one step deeper down is, well, how do I deal with this? Should I be sending out an emergency response? And it can provide recommendations for what to do. And then the last piece, which is the most difficult, is the what if. Like if you're trying to think you want to reduce emissions in your city, and you think, okay, well, what would happen to congestion if I added a bike lane here? So the what, why, how, and what if are the insights that we're going to be unlocking with generative AI.
That's really fascinating. Well, and you've been tracking AI and machine learning and those developments since your time at Intel and since your time before that, even at AOL. So I feel like I'm talking to someone who's really an expert in this field because you've been able to track the progress. So can you share with us some of the core developments that you've seen that have really changed the game?
Sure. And I definitely not an expert. I know you want experts on your show, but I am not an expert in this. And there are very few experts out there right
now. Right. That's the thing. I mean, this is changing and morphing so quickly. I think it's important to talk to people who were there early on because they've seen kind of the forks in the road.
Yeah. I remember a year ago, when we were first realizing what generative AI could be and realizing that this was going to be a big bet for us. And, I have been around for a while. So I remember when, as you said, back when I was working for Paul Allen at Asymmetrics, when the internet came out. And, back then I didn't realize what was going on really and how major it was going to be. But when you've seen the mobile industry emerge, when something like this happens, you realize this is at that scale. We had to go all in. And so, especially because, those with data are the ones who can really extract the most value from generative AI.
Right.
And so, for us, there are so many different large language models out there. You've got Claude from Anthropic, you've got OpenAI, which most people know of the chat GPTs, and there's dozens. And so we're not going to build our own, we're building on the backs of those folks. So, but there are methods to make, it's not just hooking up your data lake to that large language model and asking a question. You still have a lot of prompt engineering to do. You have to take your data and you have to basically tell the large language model what the data means. So that was a lot of work for us last year. Things that we learned. We actually we talked to folks at Microsoft while we were developing about their experiences on Copilot. And they also move very, very quickly. And what you find initially when you launch these things is the answers you get back are not very good and they don't really help. And then as you start tuning it in, you start getting answers, but they're obvious answers. You have to tune it a little bit more to try and give you things that will add value when you're asking these questions.
Right. And then you talked about the kind of inflection point of the internet. And there were other inflection points that you were part of, either at AOL or at Intel, where you were able to really move the needle there. Could you tell us about those experiences?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when you're it's interesting because you think about how small companies can move very quickly. And you think about, because they're willing to take the risks. But really big companies, once they start to move, they do big things. So, at AOL, when the mobile industry was really taking off and we started hooking up, AOL Instant Messenger had, boy, I can't remember now, 50, 60, 70 million users. And when we hooked up what was going across the internet up to the mobile networks, all of a sudden we drove usage of mobile devices through the roof. And so there were commercials for people doing instant messaging on their phones, even before you had the smartphones. You were the 12 key texting back and forth. So, or the 10 key. So, yeah, so that mobile industry transformation, the big companies really did, really capitalize that in big ways. And then the same thing with Intel. My time there was really when the Internet of Things was taking off with devices. And so, obviously Intel's, its bottom line is the chip manufacturing. And so we worked to build software that would expose the features of those chips for devices out in the cloud.
Right, right. And now it's kind of like the internet. It's everywhere. Everything has a chip. And so the big push at that time was, hey, let's make smarter toasters. Let's make smarter desks, smarter refrigerators. And now everything has a chip. Even my kids' toys have chips, right?
Yep.
Right. So that's been a big shift. And younger listeners might not realize that this wasn't always the case. Just like the kind of conventions that we have with Slack or with Microsoft Teams didn't exist before things like AIM from AOL really took off and popularized things like threads and asynchronous replies and all of those conventions that you've been part of. So I know that information flowing back and forth between people has been super important with messaging, but where do you think that smarter devices and AI will come together? I'm thinking especially of like smart cars. Is a car going to be driven off of INRIX's data without human input?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we provide now, as an example, we have a product for cities called Curbside Analytics. But what it does is inside of a city, knows where all its different zones are. So, for example, this section is for 3-minute drop off. This section is only for residential parking. They've got all of that mapped out in their city, but then things change. And so they have a construction area. And so they will, they have a visualization of their city. They'll mark off that area and then they communicate. There's a standard for communicating this out to autonomous vehicle operators. So it basically says you can't go through this section now because we're closing down one lane or we're closing down this section. So in real time or close to real time, this information is sent out to the automotive folks who subscribe to that, and then they reroute around that. So that kind of connection between that we facilitate between cities and autonomous vehicles is definitely something that is just starting to happen.
Yeah. Well, in the era of what I guess we're calling spatial computing with 3D headsets from Apple and from, Meta and other people, I really wonder if there's going to be a combination of the driving experience in spatial computing, that I'm going to be able to have an augmented reality view of the world as I'm driving. Like I'm passing a shop and it will say, hey, I have a special on today. Or over here, it's going to say the freeway is closed up ahead, even though it's 3 miles ahead, take an alternate route. And those are just going to be up on my windshield as hopefully things that don't impede my driving, but things that enhance my driving. So do you see that as something that big data and AI will make possible?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And today, we provide real-time data feeds out to trucking companies to tell them about dangerous slowdowns ahead. Trucks take a lot longer to slow down than smaller vehicles. So we alert them when there's harsh braking ahead so they can begin that slowdown. So that kind of thing is starting to happen, and fleets, invest in that. And we're actually seeing it in other countries in the Netherlands as well, where they're mandating this out, saying all vehicles coming through need to have these kind of services. So the automotive manufacturers, I expect, will will all start to put in these kind of safety capabilities by default.
Right, right. And I do hope that I'm not seeing sales popping up from shops I'm passing, but I'm
Yeah.
sure somebody's going to try to monetize that. Like, turn off sales for $5 more a month for your data subscription. So this does bring me to the question of what are the kind of business models for the future of kind of ever-present data? Because we moved from just to go way back in the history of software, we moved from a buy it in a box and install it on floppy disks into buy it in a box and install it on CD-ROMs, right? And then we move from there to download your software here and enter a special code. And now we're in the era of subscription, always on, always updating. Like my kid the other day said, why would I change a version of software? What is that? Because all of their software on their laptop continuously updates. So they are unfamiliar with the idea of buying box software. So I wonder in the future, as we have persistent, ever-present AIs, how is that going to be monetized? Do you see any models that are going to emerge out of that world?
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think we have necessarily seen the business model that has captured the most value out of this. In the end, you need to focus on that value-based pricing. So, price it at the level. Now with generative AI, with it moving so quickly, having talked to some of the folks who, have already released products into the market, they were guessing. They weren't sure what the market would bear. They weren't even sure how much value they were adding for customers. They just saw that it was a lot.
Right. So it's kind of a shot in the dark as far as pricing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you still see, you take the Microsoft Copilot, right? They've updated their pricing recently, and you get these, and it's not just one way or one model. So for example, with generative AI, they've got a professional, I think it's called the professional pricing. And basically it's single user pricing. It's just for you if you want to use generative AI and your data. But at an enterprise, a company, it's got a lot of data internally that you want to have access to, or you want the generative AI to have access to give you some of those insights in your own data.
Right.
Well, that then, they are pricing based on the amount of data that it's going to have to be looking through, because generative AI also costs a lot to run. So, there's going to be some misses for sure. But in the early days, I mean, whether you're a consumer paying for Mid-Journey, when when ChatGPT now has image generation for free. So, there's these, we're going to see a lot of competition and a lot of different business models attempt.
Well, let's talk a little bit deeper about the business model for a second, because one thing that I think we forget about is that when you feed your own data into an AI to ingest and to learn from, you're actually adding value to that AI and to that company. So, and the old saw is if you aren't being charged for the product, you are the product.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, like Facebook doesn't charge you because they're learning from you. And they're able to monetize it by understanding you more deeply. So as companies say, hey, give us all your data and we won't charge you for AI that you're using because we're building something off of your own data. So I wonder if that's going to flip around too. I mean, we're seeing this very week, we saw Mark Zuckerberg and others have to own their mistakes. And so there are going to be some mistakes as AI rolls out. And it's not just going to be the monetization models, but it's also how they use data and if consumers are fully informed, right?
Yeah, no, and that's where some of the dangers come from, come about from. Honestly, we've heard. I'm optimistic by nature, and with generative AI, early on, I was, when there were some of the original folks who were, saying we're putting out a lot of fear about generative AI, and I was thinking, well, this is just another tool.
Yeah.
This is, yes, this is at the level of the internet, but we learned how to use the internet. Well, the fact is, we didn't really learn how to control the internet, right? That's why Zuckerberg was apologizing, to all those families for the things that all of these, what their products and the damage they did to all those children. And so, we do have to be careful because we don't know what's going to be happening, what we're gonna unleash. I mean, we have a lot of good ideas of what could happen, whether it's the fake news and the generative AI, creation. But I also am very optimistic that the value that we're going to create is, unlike anything we've seen before. So I think that's going to be a lot of positive things will come out of this. I'm hoping that a lot of the younger folks who are listening to this, who are starting new companies, that they're looking for ways to really find that.
Yeah. Well, in the last few minutes, I'd love to ask you if you have any tips or insights into how somebody can take a company from, say, $1 million a year to 5 to 10 million. Like, a lot of our listeners are at that early stage where they've had some success and they're wondering how to scale. And you've had success doing that multiple times with multiple companies. So, care to share some secrets with us?
Sure. Companies go through different stages. Like you say, that 0 to 1 stage is really hard. And so, that's where most companies fail is just getting your first million. And for those who get there, you've accomplished something huge. But companies also have another couple of stages where they can fumble. And that is when you no longer can communicate, easily with the folks around you. When you're more than 10 people, when you're starting to get to that 50-person size, that is a stage where, it's about communication internally and setting up the playbooks in the different groups. So really setting up that how you're going to operate from a sales perspective, how you're going to operate from a customer success perspective. And for that, what you were, I've been in companies in the beginning, you've got a great idea and you're just kind of winging it. You get some traction and you just keep doing that. And that's great. At a certain point, you have to get more formalized. You need to start putting in, sort of rhythms of the business so that you start to create this machine. And then, once you've got that can start to work, and you start to grow again, you'll get up to, another couple of hundred people. And then a lot of companies stall then because, and usually as you start to get to that, a few hundred people, you can easily get caught up in letting the process run things for you. You think that machine that you put in place when you were smaller, you think that will keep working, but you need to change as your company grows.
Right.
And you need to change that machinery and some of those playbooks. So, maybe in the beginning you had a product manager who could define everything. But if your product gets bigger, you now need people to specialize. You might need somebody who specializes in helping customers get to the next level inside of your product. So that specialization will be a new, machine for your company. And that can also, if you just try and keep doing things the old way and just scale at that level, your machine will break. And so it can often be difficult to identify what are those areas because, you might have a sales team that has done a great job focusing on the small business. But when they go to the medium or large size enterprise, it's a different sales cycle. You can't just, do cold calling. You start to move into more relationship sales. And so, but knowing those sorts of things, really, you got to have some good mentors who've gone through this, who can identify those areas of your business that you may not even realize are the issue.
Right. And they can point out to you what got you here isn't what's going to get you to the next level. What got you here is not going to get you there. Right. So making that transition is difficult too, because sometimes even for the executives or the founders, it takes a different skill set.
Yes, no, that's exactly true. And it's just like, you can have an engineer who is amazing at their job, and then they start to want to progress in their career, and they're given management over some people, and they may not have the skills to do that.
Right.
And so, same thing can be true of founders, and you need to be able to recognize that of this is what I'm good at. How do I surround myself with the people that are good at the things I'm not good at?
Right. Well, a metaphor I like is just because somebody is a great sprinter doesn't mean they can run a marathon, or doesn't mean that they're good at running a marathon. So being able to get other players in the picture who have a different set of skills can really help your company to progress. Great. So, Raine, two last questions. The first one is, what's next for you? You've done so much at Adobe, at AOL, at Intel, and now at INRIX. What's next for you?
Well, for me, it is, I have, as we've talked about here, I've been around for a long time. And honestly, I was thinking that I might retire sometime in the near future, but I wasn't really sure what that was going to mean.
Uh-huh.
But then with the advent of generative AI coming out, I feel, well, I feel like I did when the internet first came out, and I was, there was so much magic and possibilities. So for me, it is, I am all in on learning from the real experts on generative AI. At INRIX, I'm lucky in that I have some great data scientists and some folks who are, true experts in this area. And so I'm just, I intend to continue to invest in learning around generative AI and hopefully unlocking some of that goodness that we talked about that can come from generative AI.
Fantastic. Well, our last question for this Dare podcast is always, what do you dare to dream, Raine? Or what have you dared to dream in your work or your life?
Well, I would really like. So I have been on the board of a nonprofit called Pasado Safe Haven, and they work with rescuing animals and rehabilitating them, and that is great. And one of the things that I always look at these nonprofits, and you look at trying to run them like a business, like making that efficient, but you also have to remember that what they do is these nonprofits are for the good of the world. They're trying to improve things. And so I dare to dream that one day we can look at nonprofits like we look at businesses. I mean, I've spent my whole career working on, companies to make them rich and to make them better. You look for your exit, your IPO. But I'm looking, and I hope that we can come to a place where we can connect those business values with the social values, and that we can look at doing all those good things just like we look at, making money. And I think when you have something like generative AI, you have that possibility. I don't know how that's gonna happen. We see all the potential bad things that can come up with this, like we talked about before, on the fake news, but we might be able to also unlock things that allow us to really know what is true and what is not true, and really help us to make better decisions as a society. So that's my dare to dream moment, is that generative AI can really be applied to the social side of what we do.
So making the world a better place.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the conversation, Raine. It's been marvelous to track your career and to get a little window into all the accomplishments that you've had over the course of your work in software. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk in person one of these days.
Yes, that sounds good. Thanks for having me, Ned.
Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on Dare, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on Dare, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. Dare is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.